Are you sure we're good?
I will be when we're done.
Ah, crap, that's the intro. Hello, everybody, and welcome to WordCast number 68. This is, I think, going to be a really fun episode. We've got a lot of interesting news. Big surprise to all of our viewers, we have a lot of Apple and AMD news. That almost never happens on this podcast, ever. Actually, some interesting stuff, and actually some things with Apple that's exciting. A super huge PC nerd that runs a PC-oriented tech channel. Actually kind of impressed. Nothing that I'll use, but still... Apple, I feel like, is doing a better job taking advantage of their ecosystem. Yeah. And then we've got AMD, well, maybe doing some supercomputer stuff, and by maybe we mean for sure.
Also a very big shakeup in the open source and Linux community with some stuff going on with Red Hat, some big right-to-repair changes as well, so just a lot of big topics this week.
Yeah. And then we've, of course, got the Red Hydrogen reviews, the OnePlus 6T reviews, and 2080 Ti's being potentially garbage for a reason you might not know of.
Yeah.
So, I guess we should jump straight into it. Alright, so jumping into the Apple news first, though.
Yeah, we're going to go in order of how they announced the products, just to make things simple. So first up, the first thing they talked about was the MacBook Air. They haven't updated this in a few years.
It's been almost more than a few.
Yeah, it's looked the same as it has since launch.
Yeah.
And then it's been a few years since they updated the internals.
Yeah.
They changed everything to make it a much more modernized MacBook Air. It looks a lot more like the MacBook Pro and the MacBook. Essentially,
oddly enough, more like the Pro than the MacBook.
Yeah.
Even though this is the Air.
And it's cheaper than the Pro.
And it's cheap. Yeah, it's just... Or than the
we'll talk about that later. But essentially what we have here is a MacBook Air with a 2560 by 1600 Retina display, wide color gamut and everything like they've been doing in all of their displays now. It is LCD.
Is it the color correction? I always forget what it's called.
True Tone?
True Tone.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
They didn't mention it if it is.
Okay.
I haven't looked at the
I would
specs
assume they
for
would
it.
mention that if it was. So.
It's got 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports and a headphone jack.
I'm glad that they kept a headphone jack on it. Thank you, guys.
I'm also glad that they kept the webcam mounted at the top instead of putting it at the bottom.
What?
Yeah.
What?
They literally mentioned that. They're like, we kept the webcam at the top because that's where it should be.
Well, I mean...
He's waving at his badly...
I have an
webcam.
XPS 15.
Yeah.
Now, luckily, I never use the webcam, like
good.
most users.
Yeah.
So...
It does have Touch ID, which is really cool. It can be used for authentication, Apple Pay, all of that.
All the good stuff that you would expect Touch ID to be used for.
Yeah.
Because, they can't put Face ID in laptops.
Yeah. It is both thinner and lighter, but then also smaller, like when it's closed, if you were to set them on top. This one is smaller in X and Y dimensions as well. Than the last gen MacBook Air.
Do we know, is this, speaking of smaller, is this using the butterfly keyboard?
They said it's using a new version of it. They didn't specify how new, so it might be a minor change, it might be not.
I would love it if they could give it more travel distance.
Yeah.
Okay.
I doubt with it being thinner.
Yeah, because that's one of the main things they've used to make things thinner.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, my complaint with the MacBook Pro is very much so that the goal was to make it too thin, right? Whereas I feel like the keyboard matters on that. Whereas when it's a consumer device, it's understandable to make a keyboard that is almost inarguably worse, but for the purpose of thinness, I can agree with that to a point.
So despite them making it so much smaller, they were able to keep the battery, depending on the task, on par or better than the last gen MacBook Air. Less room for battery, probably just means more efficient management
smaller
of the processor.
internals too, of course, is going to help. So the battery might not be physically that much smaller.
That's true.
Size-wise.
Less room for battery.
Yeah.
Especially since the release of the original MacBook Airs, they did develop everything they needed to do the oddly stacked batteries like they did.
They did. Yeah.
That's a pretty unique thing most companies don't do.
Yeah, most companies can't.
Yeah. Up to 16 gigs of RAM compared to the 8 of the last MacBook Air.
Good.
And up to a 1.5 terabyte SSD. I wonder why they stopped at 1.5? Since they have two
space on board, chip space
Okay.
on board, yeah. I'm pretty sure that's what it comes down to.
Only dual-core CPUs, unfortunately. I know it's also space, but
I think that's also okay. Like, I'm okay with the MacBook and the Air having the dual core. What made me really mad was the MacBook Pro 13
So I would
having
agree,
a dual
except
core.
for the part where they advertise this as a creative device.
And they did do that, and that's, yeah. And when it comes to it, too, Intel has good quad cores for Ultrabooks now, too. So it's like,
Yeah.
why didn't they? I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I'm in agreement with...
And then the T2 chip, which serves a bunch of functions, mainly security, and then also much faster HEVC encoding.
Which is useful.
Yeah.
I'm
Those
sure
are the
that's
two
something
big things
Final
they
Cut and
talked
stuff
about
can
there.
take advantage of in some ways.
So all in all, it seems like a pretty solid product. The biggest issue that I have with it mostly is that its base storage is 128 gigs.
And then, of course, there's the convoluted, like, idea behind the MacBook lineup
I'm
right
not
now.
gonna. Yeah, no.
And I mean,
that's not a problem with this. I
No,
feel
it's
like
not a
that's
problem with the
actually
device.
bigger
That's a problem
with.
with Apple, really.
I think that's more so just a bigger problem with the regular MacBook in general.
Yeah, so what we're
changing
talking
that a
about,
little
I've
bit
talked
would
about
fix
in
it.
other podcasts before, was how the MacBook is now what the MacBook Air stood for. And it's kind of weird to release, like, oh, here's the MacBook, it's supposed to be the generic consumer device, and the Air is supposed to be the thin and light, super thin, like premium, you pay a premium for a thin and light machine, and that's completely flopped now, and it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make sense because Apple's not usually one to change the nomenclature of their lineup to be confusing, and that's more so what I'm getting at, is they're usually good at, like, it's fine if they want to change the direction and the meaning of those products, but Apple's usually good at not doing that.
Yeah.
They're usually good at keeping things fluid.
So the MacBook Air is $100 cheaper than the MacBook. It has more Thunderbolt ports and a much higher resolution display, but also starts out at half the storage.
Yeah, and then at the same time, the term Air doesn't make sense because the MacBook's still smaller.
Yeah, it's thinner, it's lighter.
Yeah, so it's like, I don't quite get, like, if they want the Air to be, I almost feel like they should have tried to come up with a better name or something. If they want the Air to be the middle ground machine for creators, and the MacBook, because the MacBook's always been the bottom of the spec of, you want a Mac, you're a normie, here you go. And the MacBook Pro has always been, you need work done, or you want a machine that you're going to use for 8 years and we'll keep updates to it. Then you go that route. And the Air was you want thin and light, right? And I'm fine if they want to change and not have that and just have the MacBook be the thin and light, but I think the Air is just the wrong name for it, and that's going to confuse some people. So, I don't know. But the Mac Mini was actually the most interesting aspect of all of this to me, personally.
Yeah, this is really cool. So
they're doing a lot with it.
Yeah, they're pretty much like considering this another... I'm surprised they didn't call it Mac Mini Pro. They
should have, and I actually kind of like the sound of that name, too.
Because they've got the iMac Pro, they're working on an actual Mac Pro, and this is kind of another just like Pro device. It's so you've got the options of either 4 or 6 cores, up to 64 gigs of RAM, up to a 2 terabyte SSD, up to a 10 gigabit Ethernet port. It's got great I/O, 4 Thunderbolt 3 ports, HDMI 2, 2 USB-A ports.
USB Type 3, USB 3.
Yes.
We should note on those. Yeah.
And then it's also got features as far as being able to use it.
This is cool.
As a render farm. They were showing like stacks of like 10 of them.
Yeah.
Being able to use it as an Xcode server for things like automated testing of your apps as you're doing it. The Xcode stuff can run on a separate device.
It's super
cool.
So
you can be working on your MacBook Pro doing the coding while having this as like almost like an eGPU, but instead of being for graphics, it's for
Yeah, right. And especially render farm, I think, is a great idea for people that, because you can edit pretty well on things like a MacBook Pro or even a MacBook, depending on how big the project is. But the issues come into play when you need to render. It's just like, boof.
Yeah.
Or of course, I suppose if you're rendering, like, if you're working with, really crazy 4K footage and stuff. But in general, the editing isn't the problem, it's the rendering that's a problem, and this can help with that.
Especially for really large projects.
Now, a lot of what Apple's been doing with their desktops, in my mind, has been coming to the realization that most consumers don't have just a desktop in their house anymore. If you have a desktop, it's because you're getting work done, you're gaming, you're very likely a gamer or a nerd. That's basically it. And that market's bigger than ever.
Or you're really old.
Or you're really old. There you go. And that market's bigger than ever in terms of what I mean by the nerds and stuff, the market for the high-end devices,
Yeah.
and desktops suit that best.
I
But
think
I think
the
they
market
understand
for creatives is bigger than ever with
that too.
the growing
Yeah.
online communities and the growing ways to make money
Absolutely.
online.
I think actually that's a better way to put it. Yes, gamers, nerds, and creators are the ones purchasing high performance machines, especially desktops. Whereas you have more normal people are going the laptop route almost exclusively.
Yeah.
Because if you're just going to browse Facebook and stuff, why do you need to sit down at a desk with a chair when you could sit in a comfy recliner with a laptop or something, right?
Yeah. I think that everyone should fully expect to see a lot of products announced over the next few years focused at online content creators. We've already started
We've
seeing
already
it more
seen
and
that
more,
recently over the last
and
3 or 5
I
years.
think that it was probably, my guess, it was like for a lot of these companies 2-ish years ago, they realized like this is going to be the mainstream.
Yeah.
And they probably all started working on things then.
Yeah.
I think that we're probably, I would say especially 2020 would be my guess, going to see that be the year of like hardware for content creators.
And I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
And I think it's a weird thing though economically, like how that changes the state of this country and the world really when it comes down to creators supporting creators and stuff like that, where it's like this new business venture that's completely different.
It's coming, I think, at the right time, though, is like as we see something like AI ramp up, which is going to take away jobs.
Yeah,
it's
we need
creating
creative
a new
jobs.
way to have jobs that can't be as easily replaced by AI, and even if they could, it's not necessarily something people would want to be, because like
What's the
AI
point?
can
Yeah.
make art. There was a painting sold for like $400,000 that was made by AI.
Yeah.
AI can make music, but a lot of
do
what we're seeing
people-
with content creation is the connection with the creator.
Exactly. There we go. Yeah, people don't like if they know it's made by an AI, they're like, eh.
Or you might
and by
listen
the
to
way, I did
music-
want to mention the music made by the AI was black death metal. So that's not too complex because the entire album sounded the same basically. Yes, I listened to a lot of it.
That will also get better though.
It will get better, but you get the point. Is it's like, oh, you can make loud vibrating noises. That's like giving an AI like, hey, you need to make dubstep. Build up, drop. Like, come on. Like, it's not like, yeah. I mean, it's still an impressive feat, right, of engineering. I'm not discrediting the people that did that or people that are enthusiastic about that. I'm just saying that that it's a long ways off from even being able to do close to what a mediocre creative person could do.
For now, but we also are
and
seeing
that, of course,
AI
will
progress
change.
at a much faster rate than people progress.
That's true, but creativity is something very different, and also something that can't be the human brain can't be matched with x86 or ARM
that's
processing.
the thing, is that what's going to end up, I think, happening with AI, it's not really going to be creativity, because that's, I don't think, how computers work. It's going to I mean, until we have like sentient AI. But I think it's more so
Please no.
I mean, it's going to happen at some point. I think more so what we're going to see is essentially AI being able to like analyze a bunch of songs, see what is liked in music. Especially when now that we have streaming services rather than you download or you listen to a CD, meaning they can see what parts people drop off at in a song, for example. A lot more data to see what people like and what they don't. And with that, AI will eventually be able to get full pictures of what people like for songs. I wouldn't be surprised if in 100 years, AI makes songs for you. You specifically.
Yeah, no, that wouldn't surprise me either.
On
that
your
wouldn't,
phone. Like, your phone can just like, oh, you listen to these songs that we made, we'll make you these other songs because you liked these ones and not these ones.
This spiraled into a fun conversation, I will say. And, you know,
we got
I
from
think
Mac Mini
to AI,
to AI
making music.
yeah.
And then I also wanted to touch though on going back to the creative stuff more related to the Mac Mini and the market in general. Is I think one thing that's scary about that is the mass amount of creators is what's making companies like Facebook and Google so large and kind of scary, right? And I think it's creators that are really helping push that. And it's like, you know, like if YouTube, let's say YouTube literally was just gone, right? How many creators would be just destroyed, their careers destroyed? Not talking, you know, the Matt Pats of this world and the Linus Tech Tips. I'm talking the middle of the road creators. I'm talking like, you know, maybe this channel in a year or two, like that style creator where it's like it's enough to live off of in an apartment or something of the sort.
So, I mean, that's why it comes down to being smart with your business, and when it becomes the point where you're making money, you need to diversify.
Absolutely.
And I think that eventually there's going to be some kind of crash in this market. And when that happens, it's the people that survive are going to be the ones that diversified well enough.
I think so.
Because if you can, ultimately, when you grow enough as a content creator, you need to ensure that it's not your channel that is followed. It's your brand.
And your brand, and your content.
Yeah. Ultimately, I think that what realistically every content creator who is doing well should do is have a website that they constantly bring up, not even to actively post on then, but to be a place where, like, if all of a sudden you dropped off the rest of the internet, your people knew where to go. Yeah.
And that's something I think I want to work towards for this channel, and eventually I would actually like to self-host our videos.
Yeah.
Kind of like Float Plane with Linus Tech Tips. That's a goal of mine that I think could be achievable, but not in that scope, but just us. Yeah. Just this channel and our few little channels. Hosted high-quality video, but that's obviously expensive. So, but I think those kinds of things are things creators should look towards. Yeah, I agree with that. It's something that they can do on their own if Facebook, Google, Twitter say all died in one day.
Yeah.
You need to be ready for that sort of doomsday scenario.
Yeah. Also, the Mac Mini has the T2 chip.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to clarify that because I think that's important.
I think so.
So, yeah, environmental impact. They mentioned this both with the MacBook Air and the Mac Mini, so I thought I would just sum it all up together. Essentially, what Apple announced is the MacBook Air and the Mac Mini are using 100% recycled aluminum.
So now we know where all those recycled iPhones went.
Well, they're working, especially with the iPhone. They've said multiple times they want to get to the point where they don't have to mine for the iPhone.
I mean, they're still going to have to for silicon, but then
the end goal is being able to find ways to reprocess every silicon they need to.
And I don't know if that's possible.
They didn't say it's going to happen anytime soon.
I know. And I mean, also, to be fair, Apple could still claim 100% recycled on their part because they buy the chips. They don't manufacture them in-house, right? So, in terms of the silicon.
Yeah.
So they could say that they could still say that they're using like 100%, it's all recycled, but that doesn't mean that the iPhone or whatever is 100% recycled, if you know what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah, but, so like they're not taking an iPhone and making it into another iPhone.
Yeah. More so what I mean is like they could still use the claim of
their end goal.
Our manufacturing. I know their end goal is full renewability, which I think is actually good for business in the long run, right? But anyway, I think it's interesting.
Yeah. So to do this, because you could always just like remelt aluminum and put it together in whatever form you want, but that creates issues. Like, it's not sustainable for the aluminum as far as like structure. So Apple had to go and actually like make a new aluminum alloy that's designed to properly utilize like shavings and recycled aluminum.
Very cool. Very cool.
And then also they are upping the amount of post-consumer plastics that they're using within the internals of the MacBook. So things like the plastic in the speakers are more recycled material than they used to be. I think on the MacBook Air, it's like 35% of the plastics are post-consumer recycled, and on the Mac Mini, I think it's 50 or 60%.
Wow, that's impressive.
And also the Mac Mini has a lot more plastic because the base is plastic.
Yeah.
And so they mentioned for the Mac Mini that between
keyboard's plastic, right, in the Mac.
That's true.
But yeah.
For the Mac Mini, they mentioned that between the aluminum and the post-consumer plastic that they're using, they've cut the carbon footprint almost in half.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. So, congrats to them. Jumping into the iPad, that was probably loud. Jumping into the iPad, iPad Pro specifically.
Yes, so they did a proper, not just like refresh, but like a full update for the iPad Pro this time.
As you can see, I'll put it up on the screen. It's actually pretty. I like it. I think it looks nice, and
so
it's especially good because there's no good tablets anywhere else right now other than the Surface.
So they went for shrinking the bezels, but giving you room to grip, which was important. That was a concern a lot of people had with the rumors that they were going to be
like edge to edge, which would have been a problem. I've had that problem before with phones, actually. Samsung's phones, the top and bottom bezel being that way when you're trying to hold it. It's like, I want to play a game, I've got to hold it like this because I can't hold it like this.
Oh, I don't hold like when I play games, I just hold my phone like this, so I don't have that problem.
Yeah, I get sore over time holding my phone like that.
Oh, I don't know.
So.
I since this is actually just like a natural way that I hold my phone.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like I turn the orientation, I'm still holding the phone.
Yeah, I get you.
Because I find that I have never dropped a phone out of my hand while I'm holding it when I held it like this.
Yes.
So I got used to it. So yeah, I have dropped a phone. Well, not really. I dropped it. It fell out of my bike mount.
Like you said, like at the city of Portland dropped your phone.
The city of Portland dropped my phone because they were bad at paving.
So anyway, though, yeah. So they have a 10.5 inch and a 12.9 inch model.
No. So what used to be the 10.5 inch iPad Pro is now an 11 inch display in the same X and Y dimension footprint. So like the same width and height, bigger screen. Now the 12.9 inch though, they kept the screen size the same and shrunk the physical size. So it's no longer as ridiculous. It's just it's just the big screen.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So Face ID is on both of these, and unlike on the iPhones, it actually works in both orientations finally.
Whoa. Magic.
Yeah.
That's the funny thing, actually, is Android phones and the like that used cameras for facial recognition that were almost as hard to fool as Face ID. Mm-hmm. Worked in any orientation.
But didn't work in the dark.
Didn't OnePlus's? Because I think I had an IR blaster or something?
No. MKBHD specifically mentioned how in his OnePlus 6T video...
you're right. It doesn't work in the...
Yeah.
Okay,
so
that's easily solvable. You want to know how? Now, it sucks, but just when it's... You'd have to have some way of it seeing enough to know that somebody is there, and then you just screen white full brightness. So you're like in the dark, and you need to unlock your phone, and it's just like flash, and then it goes back to normal, whatever you had it set at, like 10%, 5%.
And by the time that you're like no longer disoriented from the flash, it's locked again.
It's locked again. It would be great. It would be great. Dude, that would be actually kind of funny, though. It's like, what was that? My new phone. No worries.
So, yeah, Face ID. It's got an A12X Bionic chip, which is an upgraded version of what's in the XS.
So, it is an A12 overclocked.
No. The A12 is a 2 high-performance core, 4 high-efficiency core.
Right.
The A12X is 4 and 4.
Okay.
And since all are usable at once, like on the regular A12... That means that you have 8 cores available to high-intensity programs on the iPad.
Right.
Just
okay.
Of sets of 4.
Which is cool. Is cool. I mean, high-performance tablet is nice. I still think that there are some...
also mentioned 35% single-core performance increase over last iPad Pro.
That doesn't surprise me. A lot of that's probably clocks.
Yeah.
Probably boost clocks capabilities. And of course, efficiencies.
7 nanometer.
Yeah, 7 nanometer, woot woot. Apple's still first with 7 nanometer. It's great.
I know. Did Huawei actually release that phone yet?
Or, I don't think so.
Because does this make Apple the first and second to 7 nanometer?
It might. Did
they really release?
I don't know if that phone came out.
Did they really release 2 7 nanometer chips?
Okay, let's be fair. They're Apple. They can do whatever they want.
But we had another company announce a 7 nanometer product before them.
Yes, that's correct. A lot of them aren't coming to market because if you're TSMC or Samsung,
that's true.
Who do you care about? Like, come on, let's be real. It's like, Huawei, we understand you wanted these chips, but Apple... And the Huawei CEO just walks out of the room like, yep.
Especially also, since from an investment standpoint, think about if you can say, look at how good our 7 nanometer was with Apple to other companies as to why they should do business with you and
Apple
why investors should invest in your 7 nanometer.
Yeah.
I guarantee you the A12X is going to perform a lot better than Huawei's 7 nanometer.
And... oh boy, EUV is expensive enough. It's understandable that they want as much freaking cash rolling as they possibly can. And if Apple's willing, Apple's going to sell more units than Huawei. That's just how it works in terms of CPUs. And
especially since Huawei's getting so hit in the US.
Yes. TSMC needs that money because building EUV fabs is stupid expensive. So I think TSMC's 7 nanometer, some of it, if not all of it, right now, I think might be able to be done without EUV. I can't remember. I know Intel's been pushing towards EUV. Samsung has been putting a lot of money into it, and I think that's how like IBM says they can reach 5 nanometer. I think that's all through the theoretical of EUV. Maybe it was 3, but that's all through the theoretics of EUV.
I remember 5 a while ago.
It was a while ago, so it might be 3 now. But that's still theoretical within EUV manufacturing. Actually, building a chip like that is a different story because of how astronomically expensive EUV machines are. So
and
for those of you who don't know, EUV is extreme ultraviolet. It's a form of photolithography. Ultraviolet's what's been the standard for a long time. This is extreme. Yeah. So anyway, up to 1 terabyte of storage on an iPad, though.
Yeah, they were like, that might help professionals who are trying to do work on content creation.
No, I think the question is, how many professionals work on an iPad?
For things like drawing, it's growing in much higher numbers. There's also
that's about it. No, I'm kidding.
There's also, they talked about like AutoCAD. There's actual good video editing programs on iPad and
that's
new
true,
ones
especially
coming
like
out,
Premiere
that
Rush.
type of thing. Premiere Rush.
Yeah.
But even Apple's iMovie's been pretty good at doing like
Basic.
multiple 4K clips together.
Yeah,
Like that's something most Android phones can't do because there's no apps for it.
Yeah.
Even now, their Premiere Rush isn't on Android yet.
Yeah,
So,
not yet.
I mean, it's ultimately Apple's understanding with the iPad Pro that they both need the users to get the software, but they also need the hardware to get the users to get the software. So it's like a cat and mouse game.
It is.
So they're just like, we're just going to build it so that we can actually justify to the devs, hey, we've got this hardware, people are buying it, make the apps.
Yeah, okay, I think it's a good approach.
And I think that with the adoption of the iPad Pros specifically for art, they've shown that when there is that support, they can make that push and it will take some market share.
I think so. And it depends, very much so on what you're doing, though, of course. I think a lot of it comes down to a laptop form factor and Windows being better for a lot of stuff and the ability to how much performance they can cram in something like this versus the iPad, right? So...
Yeah. I do think, though, that eventually Apple is gunning for the iPad just replacing the MacBook, like the base Mac.
I think maybe that's their very long term. Next couple of years. That's probably their goal. And then you've got the MacBook Air and the Pro, which maybe that starts to make sense.
They did talk about how, in a number of applications that are on this that are also on computers, this outperforms not the most powerful computers sold by manufacturers, but most of the most popular even i7 models sold by manufacturers.
And that doesn't surprise me due to optimization. And let's be fair. Let's be fair here, though, guys. This is running on TSMC 7 nanometer. All the desktops, or not desktops, but laptops out there are on 14 nanometer plus from Intel. And so maybe not exactly a fair comparison in terms of look how much faster our thing is. Yes, you're a generation ahead in terms of silicon, and that's going to make a bigger difference there. In fact, some of the AMD stuff we're going to talk about shows even more potentially how big of a difference that 7 nanometer is in comparison to something like 14 nanometer.
Yeah.
And hopefully when Intel drops to 10 nanometer, they become very competitive. We'll see.
It's just, I think that among ARM chips in general, 7 nanometer or not, we're just seeing much faster progression.
Well, and also I want to...
And that's going to cap at some point.
That will,
We're seeing much faster progression right now.
And I think mobile segment, of course, is pushing that. But I also think, and Intel missed out on that, I also think, though, there needs to be a certain level of understanding with 7 nanometer running at, 1.6 gigahertz is very different from 7 nanometer trying to push 4.5 gigahertz. Or what Intel's doing with their 14 nanometer where you can overclock to 5.2 gigahertz on like 8 cores in some cases. And that right there is a different level of performance, something that you're not going to see from 7 nanometer chips at all for a while, maybe till end of next year, like a year from now. So like I said, it's not exactly a fair comparison, but it's still impressive. Now, they also have USB-C on this.
Yes.
So good on you. I hope you change that with the next iPhone. Everybody wants you to, because then there will never be this whole, do you have an iPhone charger question? There never be. It's just, do you have a phone charger? Yes. This doesn't fit. you're old. You're on old stuff.
Yeah. So we talked about earlier before we started recording. I think that this MacBook Pro update,
iPad Pro,
or iPad Pro, yes, sorry. This iPad Pro update might be indicative of where Apple is going for the next generation of iPhones. We're seeing a very different design from Apple. They've been so focused on curves.
Yeah.
And this is very flat. The edges are flat other than the corners.
The corners are rounded, yeah.
And
I mean, it actually could be a little sharp to hold. We'll just have to see and wait for the
well, I think that what it is that the actual spots you grab
are not too bad,
are curved, but it's not like the whole thing is sloped like it was on the iPads.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if what we're going to see is, because Apple generally likes to keep things looking kind of similar.
They do.
We're going to see some of this design language carry over to the iPhone along with USB-C.
I'm sure we're going to see at least some of it, yeah. I don't know.
Also, you can use USB-C on the iPad to charge other devices, which means if you want to charge your iPhone with your iPad, you can, so long as you buy a very expensive cable.
Because Apple doesn't include a USB-C to Lightning cable.
Yeah.
Good job, Apple, also for not including a Lightning to headphone jack, and also not including USB-C to regular USB when you first did that with MacBooks and the like. You should have included a basic adapter, but as we know, a huge amount of your profit comes from dongles.
Dongle.
It's mind-boggling how much money comes from dongles. Okay, so then it's got Face ID.
Yeah, we mentioned that.
So that's all there is there, yeah.
And then the Apple Pencil has changed quite a bit. So for one, if you have an old Apple Pencil and you're upgrading to this iPad Pro, you gotta buy a new one?
But I think that's understandable because you can't plug a Lightning Apple Pencil into a C port.
Yeah.
So, what are you going to do? Charge your Apple Pencil on your iPhone and then go use it? No.
And the way that pairing works. So essentially what they've done with the new Apple Pencil is there is no plugging it in. No more of that dumb having your pencil stick out of your iPad to charge.
To break.
Yes. Essentially what it is now is similar to the Surface. They've got a spot on the side that is magnetic. That when you place it on there, it automatically wirelessly charges. That is also how pairing works, so it pairs via that connection.
Great. Very simple, very fluid. Cool.
Yeah.
Happy. And then the last little tidbit of Apple news.
Yeah, this was not from the actual Apple event, but just some Apple-related news that's been coming out recently. So there was a tool that police were using called Gray Key that was used to crack passwords for iPhones to be able to get into people's phones that police suspected of committing crimes. Apple's been working very hard to deal with this because they don't want their phone crackable at all. Yep. If there is a tool that the police can use, then there is a tool that criminals can use.
That's what it comes down to. That's what backdoors come down to, and that's what our government has a lot of trouble understanding, or just denies and understands it. I think they just don't care, because the truth is, if there's the ability to get into it somehow without the password, or the fingerprint, as an example, then at that point, it's not secure. Yeah. Somebody will figure it out. Somebody had to figure out Gray Key. Yeah. Right? And so what happened with this, with the iOS 11.4.1 update, Apple attempted to block this, and it blocked the initial method, but there was an easy-ish, relatively speaking easy, workaround that was found. However, with iOS 12, it was recently discovered, so we don't know if this was iOS 12 itself or 12.01 or something. Apple completely blocked it. Cool. It is just not working. Now, I am not actually surprised. In fact, I'm surprised that news outlets just now found out. Because the whole thing with the iPhones not charging when they were plugged in, when they were asleep, was because of Apple trying to deal with this. I thought that was known. Yeah. We even talked about that aspect of this.
So it's did they know that Apple was trying to deal with this and nobody just tested if it worked?
Maybe.
Until now?
I don't know. Maybe. I like that Apple cares about this. I appreciate...
Yeah.
Now, of course, the question still comes down to, do they care about it, or do they care about public perception of it? Because there still can be other stuff in the background that changes this. You know what I mean? It changes their stance on security in terms of maybe there are some form of backdoors and stuff.
Well,
that we don't know about as consumers.
So there might be backdoors, but I don't think it would be intentional ones. I think it's probably ones Apple will try and fix. This is just a very public
I think
one.
so. I think
but
so.
Apple's been trying separate from their OS and their ecosystem and stuff. The way that they've been trying to differentiate themselves from the market, I think, to try and get people into their ecosystem, is security.
And then they're gonna break that security once they get everybody there.
Yeah,
That's
sure.
the goal.
Their laptops, their Mac Mini have the T2 security chip.
They do.
All of their phones have the security enclaves. They've been focusing on processing as much on device as they can, so they don't need to rely on sending information to the cloud, which is the opposite of what we've seen with most things from Google and Microsoft and everyone else.
Move more in that direction,
Yeah.
because there's
also,
advantages to it, but Apple's showing another advantage to having their closed ecosystem.
Yeah.
Is they're capable of doing stuff that isn't very easily implementable. That's a new word now, just like compromisation.
Yeah.
On other hardware out there that's more open and more universal, and
then also, like, if Apple has everything processed on device and they can if they focus on your device being secure, then if there's a compromisation with their servers, like say a company happens to slip a chip in there that they don't know about.
That's a thing.
If that's real or not, which is, like, it goes back and forth between whether or not
it seems very unlikely that it's real, not that it's not possible. Like, in terms of that type of hack is possible.
We'll talk about this in a second, because, like, I feel like there's new concerns that, like, you don't just happen to come up with the same time the story's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that, if they have so much focused on the phones, it's much harder to hack a million phones.
Yes.
Than it is to hack a data
server.
center, server that has a million phones worth of data.
Yeah.
And so it's just in general better for them, because ultimately people get pissed off when their data gets stolen for valid reason.
Yeah.
So
good stuff there.
Yeah.
So, more big news topics. Jumping more into PCs of the more traditional sort. I got a lot of very interesting stuff here, actually. But the first thing I wanted to lead off with was the RTX 2080 Ti's potentially dying very quickly story. A more like set of stories. Now, this isn't necessarily a confirmed issue that it's super widespread, but so far there's a pretty large number of users reporting dead on arrival or cards dying already, which they haven't been out long enough for anybody to be having cards that are dying.
I mean, there's always going to be some.
Well, right, and the thing is, we're seeing what seems like an abnormally large amount of people complaining about this, and not just an abnormally large amount of people like, oh, my card died, shit, I have to RMA it, I got my new card, they don't update the thread anymore, but instead continuing from there going, my new card died. Or my new card was dead on arrival.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Or I had issues getting a new card.
Or that, too. So people are getting blue screens of death when they exit games. That's one of the things that has been reported consistently of a potentially dying card. It is not driver related, because it is not all of them. It is enough of them, though, to point it to not being like a specific software thing, very likely. And the cards, most of the ones that are BSODing are eventually just stopping working.
And it's mostly Founders Editions.
And it's, which also points to a PCB hardware issue. Probably not a die issue. Yeah. It's not a silicon issue. I doubt something like that.
Unless they're actually binning FEs like people were claiming they were. And it happens to be the binned ones that are dying.
Yeah, or maybe it's that little overclock that they're applying to it. No, I don't think it's that. I think it's an onboard problem. There's some chip that's failing way prematurely or something of the sort.
I hope it's just 2080 Ti's, since I have a 2070.
So far, it seems like it. Nobody's reported 2080s or 2070s, which also, again, points to PCB and not an issue with the silicon.
No reports of the 2070s, but I have seen some issues with 2070s.
Yeah, but of course, like you said, there's always some of that.
Yes.
And so I don't think that's related to this. Whatever's going on here is probably related to something like power delivery of the extra power, for the extra power requirements of the bigger, like 752 millimeter squared die.
Yeah.
Or something of the sort like that's causing this. Now, what's weird is some people are reporting a very unique thing. They'll have two cards die at the same time, but they confirmed that they're dead. Mm-hmm. That's really weird. That points towards, again, a hardware thing, not a software thing. and points towards, especially if they were, say, using an SLI or two systems simultaneously, like, his and her setup or something like that, where they're both under pretty similar loads consistently, points to a chip on the PCB dying prematurely.
Under some kind of specific circumstance, it sounds like. Which I'm wondering if maybe, it would be interesting to try and get the full hardware of what everyone's been using that has had these die. Maybe there's a specific power supply that has like a weird fluctuation that isn't a problem on most hardware, but then is causing issues on these, that type of thing.
Yeah, that's a possibility.
Because it would be very odd if it wasn't something like that two chips or two cards just died at the same time.
That's a good point.
Because let's say it was just something just straight up defective, unless it's like a batch of them were bad.
Yeah.
Which is also very possible.
That could be too. This could just be a bunch of people out of a crappy batch.
Yeah, and it would make sense if you order two cards on launch day and you get
probably
two
get
cards
them
at
from
the same time.
It's the same reason people on Data Hoarder say sometimes you should just buy your hard drives 1 month at a time, and then that way you have less likely of a manufacturing issue causing a breakage at the same time, multiple drive failure at the exact same time.
And so it could be bad.
It could be a bad batch.
It could be ultimately some bad hardware on these that's reacting badly to something that's normally not an issue. There's so many different things it could be.
Yes. There's a lot that could cause this sort of thing. The frustration here, what it really comes down to, is for a $1,200 card, it should be almost none of them. Almost none of them should have a problem. It's already what everybody in the industry is saying super overpriced. People with the 2080, people are saying it's fairly overpriced. The 2070 is about where it should be. More expensive than we'd like for a 70, but about in terms of performance where it should be. The 2080 Ti is consistently, though, this is overpriced. You're paying for top notch. You're paying an early adopter fee. You're paying all this stuff. And if you want the best of the best, that's what happens. That's what Titans were too, right? But Titans didn't have a whole bunch of problems, so this could be a big deal. And we'll definitely keep an eye out on this story, especially for other cards too, if 2080s and 2070s start getting the same report, because that maybe points more towards a silicon issue, although that's very unlikely, especially because it's not like cutting edge 7 nanometer. This is just 12 nanometer tech, so it's nothing major.
Yeah, and if there are issues going on with the stack of Founders Edition cards rather than just the 2080 Ti, as I mentioned, the 2080 Ti is going to be the one that that gets mentioned first because it's the enthusiasts. Yeah. They're going to be the ones that go online and complain if they don't get an appropriate response immediately.
They're the people that spend every day on Reddit and forums,
Twitter,
like I do.
Whatever,
because that's what they care about, and so they're talking about this stuff all the time. So if they run across the issue, they're going to yell about it.
Yeah. Whereas if like a mainstream,
which they should. I mean, they should absolutely right.
If a mainstream person walks into Best Buy, buys a Founders Edition 2070 or 2080. And it dies in a month, and they just go to Best Buy and return it because they bought the insurance, and then that's it. That's it.
Yeah.
And also the 70 cards have not been out as long. So I think it's right now what we should be trying to pay attention to is if reports pop up about the 80 series, because it's been out about as long.
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah. And then 70 after that.
Yeah.
And my honest opinion is if this ends up being just a Founders Edition thing, is that it's not the chips, it's still a PCB component that they're using across the board. That is a problem, and they'll probably get it fixed quickly. Maybe
they did this to give people a reason to buy board partner cards. That way they didn't piss off the people who were mad about the board partners getting screwed over.
Maybe that's it. Maybe that could be it.
Make themselves look unreliable so nobody buys their chips to make board partners happy.
Yeah, I don't think Nvidia is bold enough to do that. No. I don't think they care enough to do
that. Speaking of bold things, though.
Yeah, so IBM did a big move, like wow, big move.
Yeah, IBM is buying Red Hat.
So we have Microsoft buy GitHub, and then IBM buys Red Hat.
For $34 billion.
Open source is done, guys. The two open source, it's gone now. There's no such thing as open source anymore.
Sure. Yeah, this is big.
$34 billion. Who knew open source was that valuable, though,
and
right?
And from what we are to understand now that we're finding out more about this, no one's going to outbid IBM. Because Red Hat's been shopping around for a buyer for a little bit now. They've gone to Google. They've gone to Facebook. They've gone to Microsoft. IBM was the one that dropped this amount of money, which means no one's probably going to sweep out from under them.
No, and also it's IBM. They're going to do what they want. And this is something that we've talked about on this podcast multiple times, is the forgetfulness of people not realizing IBM's still huge out there.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't care anymore because
Yep.
they're so old and big.
So yeah, IBM is claiming that they're going to operate mostly independently. I'm not surprised that it's not fully independently, because why would you drop this much money?
Of course, yeah.
Because I mean, also, like, let's be real. If you buy them, let them continue to run their operations, but then say, hey, we'll pay for you to staff up and also do this thing, that's not fully independent.
No, not
So,
at all.
Yeah, this is interesting. A lot of people are concerned, though, because IBM doesn't have a great history with how they've bought companies and how they've used them.
Yeah, they don't, and it doesn't surprise me that people are worried. More worried than I would be about the Microsoft GitHub acquisition.
Yeah. And then also,
weird.
like, what's going to happen, since this is a mostly independent thing, is IBM going to let Red Hat continue to commit to Fedora and CentOS?
I would imagine so.
And if so, for how long? Because most of the time, even when you have operating fully independently clauses, it's for a certain amount of time.
Instagram.
Yeah, that was a few years, and now that's done.
Now that's done, and now it's crap, and the CEO's left.
Yeah.
So I hope they don't damage Red Hat. This is really weird and big news.
If you're wondering why they're doing this, it's because IBM sees a big potential market in the hybrid cloud computing, is what they're calling it. Essentially the idea of, yes, you are hosting something in the cloud, but at any moment you can easily host it yourself. It's something that is not, like, you're using their computer, not their everything.
Yeah, right.
So it's like, unlike AWS, where you're using AWS to handle so many different things, if you want to just use this open source Red Hat OS and just move it to your own server, you can, which is going to make people more comfortable with signing up.
Yep.
And if you do a good enough job, then all you need to do is get them to sign up, and they'll stay with you.
Yeah.
So
at that point, yeah, I think IBM is really, let's put it this way.
It's a smart move.
I think IBM is really smart.
Yes.
I think they are. I might go as far as to say, in this industry, they're the smartest player.
Mm-hmm.
Look at what they've done. Look at their consistent stock, their consistent
They
business.
were able to buy an open source company for $34 billion, and the only product I know of that they actually sell is clocks to schools. And yes, I'm going to bring that up every time we talk about it.
Now, I run an IBM at work and other things like that. But IBM is... It's forgetful to the consumer how big of a player they are. And it's almost like Cisco, but on a crazier level in terms of forgetfulness. Is some people do know Cisco and stuff, but a lot of people go, IBM? They're still doing stuff? And it's like, they're more than effing doing stuff. So I wasn't surprised by them paying that amount. I was surprised by the amount, right? I'm not surprised IBM can afford it.
Yeah.
But
I'm just surprised that they're buying Red Hat in general.
In general, that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, wow. Anyway, a big win, right to repair. I didn't actually read heavily into this. You and I talked about it a little bit.
Yeah, so this is going to affect a lot of industries. Essentially, the Librarian of Congress and U.S. Copyright Office proposed some new rules. We're going to talk about two of them, one about right to repair and one about video games. The right to repair one, though, is essentially adding an exemption to current DRM laws. So currently, you're not allowed to break DRM at all.
Yeah, period.
Like if you break it, even if you have a completely legitimate reason, it is illegal. You're probably not going to get in trouble unless you're breaking.
Worst case, you get a fine.
Very specific companies will target you.
Yeah,
like John Deere
or Nintendo.
Nintendo goes after people mostly that sell the products or that sell games.
Right, that are profiting off of it.
Not so much like an individual user who breaks some stuff on their...
Whereas John Deere was going after more of that. So,
So...
less company, more personal.
Yeah, what this is doing is allowing you to hack DRM in order to physically repair or maintain a device to the same standard of operation that it was sold to you as. So this is not allowing you to break DRM to upgrade your device, but it is allowing if the company stops properly supporting it or if it's too expensive. Let's say like with Apple for a while there was an issue where if you did certain repairs, the fingerprint sensor was not working anymore because of software.
I think the screen was one of them. Yeah.
The software would disable it. So this would allow someone to legally break the DRM to make software that would allow that fingerprint sensor to work. Or in the case of John Deere, if you change a part out, because John Deere has DRM on their hardware, it would allow you to fix that without going through John Deere.
I think this is an important direction. I want to go further with this type of stuff, but I think people should have the right to do whatever they want with stuff they purchase.
Yes.
It's understandable on a software level when you don't own the software, like DRM in terms of download rights management for Steam games, right?
Yes.
Like that's a little more understandable because you don't technically own it and you can always find a way to own it. Not always, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But a hardware level thing, I feel like people should have the right to take that hardware and modify it however they see fit. If you want to replace the frickin' CPU in an iPhone
and
with a Core i3 and you can somehow make that work, kudos to you. You should be allowed. You should be legally allowed to do that because that's up to you. You do whatever you want. Software is a different aspect, especially because breaking hardware DRM tends to not be something that negatively impacts the profit of a business, but oftentimes can actually increase it, right? If there is, say, a really common mod to, like, say, add a headphone jack back to an iPhone, say it was way easier than it actually is, and that was legal to do, there might be a lot of people that go, I'm okay with buying it, I'm just going to take it apart and add a headphone jack, and maybe wouldn't previously, whereas with software, it's like, I'm going to jailbreak my phone to get free apps.
Yeah.
Right, very different.
So, I think that actually a really good example of this, though, as to see, like, the absurdity of it, is there's a Futurama episode called Overclockwise. It was about where they overclocked Bender, and they ended up having to go to court because Mom, the company that makes the robots in this show, sued the kid who overclocked his robot because it was hurting the profit of their business because they would be less likely to upgrade. And it was this whole thing about how you're taking food out of Mom's mouth by overclocking your robot. It's like it's so absurd. Some of the arguments that are used,
but this kind of stuff is like kind of realistic too, right? Is that kind of crap happens?
Yeah,
and it's like. No, Intel is an example of overclocking specifically of like, oh, you can't overclock these chips. You have to pay us more money if you want to overclock these chips because otherwise you're less likely to do the next thing. And that's just like, that's BS. Come on, stop it.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that this is actually going to have the biggest impact on John Deere products. Like that's not really going to get talked about among the tech community at least.
No, but
like the John Deere DRM stuff has been a big deal.
Because now they can charge whatever they want for their parts and authorized technician and crap like that. Instead of, you're a freaking farmer. You should be able to repair your tractor on your own. Like, come on.
Like, it's absurd. And
well, I could put this alternator in for, I don't know much about tractors, but I know some cars, so I'm going to use car lingo anyway. But I'm going to put this alternator in for $100. John Deere goes, nope, you got to buy ours for $800 and you've got to pay $500 for the authorized technician to install it.
Yeah.
What?
Yep.
No. Yeah. So this is great, and also, I didn't know this about John Deere. I hate you.
They're a terrible company.
I knew they were sketch, but I knew
I'm not going to judge them as a whole because I don't deal with their products.
We drive tractors every day, and we have like a huge 50-acre farm in the back. But no.
Yeehaw.
That's why we film in a basement.
Yes, with a fireplace.
Yeah. Because how else will we get heat in the house? Mm-hmm. It's not like we have a furnace turns on.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like, that's one of those things that it's like, if you do something like this, like, come on.
Yeah.
Like, are you really that, like, lack of confidence in your product that you can't grow your business, that you can't grow it via means that aren't just straight up screwing over the people that buy your products?
Yep. And you could still make good money by just being on the competitive landscape of those parts. Mm-hmm. Is if I had a car and it's like, oh, you can buy the Chevy part or you can buy some off-brand, I lean towards the Chevy part even if it's more expensive.
Maybe do things like offer classes on how to work on your hardware, that type of thing.
That too, yeah.
Like, offer upgrades if you don't think people are going to buy the next tractor that you release every year. You know, if you release your Tractor 10S.
Tractor. That's just the name of their product. It's just Tractor.
Yeah.
And a number.
Yes.
I love it.
And
I love it.
Don't forget the S ear.
This new one has slightly longer blades on your mower. Anyway, so now what's this about, though? Restoring abandoned online game servers. That's something that excites me, especially for games like old games like Halo and stuff, right?
So this is great, but not going to be what people, I think, expect. So again, this is another change from the Librarian of Congress and the U.S. Copyright Office. They are working on implementing something. So essentially, game researchers, game archivists, that type of thing, would be able to restore servers for games that have been completely abandoned to the point that the game is not playable. So this would not work for a game like Halo, because Halo is a single-player game partly. So
okay, but you could maybe make the argument that it's a different aspect of the game.
Multiplayer is still local player. Or still playable locally.
Yeah,
the point of this is, again, not for just people being able to play the game. The point is for the sake of archive.
And archive,
or preservation. And so, with this, they will be able to have their own servers. However, games can only be played on premises. It is actually meant for, like, a video game museum, that type of thing. Keeping the history of the game going, rather than just allowing, like, oh, they shut down the server? Cool, we just get to do whatever we want now.
So what you could do to bypass this is set up a VPN, so that then you can say that it's on-premise because it's on-premise of the same...
I was going to say you could build a really big building.
I mean, that could work, yeah. Well, it wouldn't be a big building, it'd be a long hallway with an Ethernet cable.
If you live in an area that doesn't get rain, could you just live outdoors and then everyone is on premises? Define premises.
I don't know how to define premises. So, I don't know.
Yeah, so essentially, it's... For the game preservation aspect, this is really good. It's just not what everyone wants.
Yeah, for consumers wanting to play, World of Warcraft Classic, before the new one. Forever.
And I do think that stuff like that is part of why I don't think that we will very likely ever see it just fully be open.
Because companies don't want that because they can't re-release stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you're ultimately limiting the future potential businesses. And businesses won't like that because you're limiting them.
Yes. AMD has millions of dollars.
I would hope so.
So, now to jump into some really good AMD news, actually. We a lot of times have AMD sections because they've been such a hot topic over the last 2 years, or over a year and a half. No, it has been 2 years, hasn't it? Wow. With high-performance computing. And so AMD is actually making a bold claim that their next-gen gaming GPUs will be competitive on the high end. Now, first question is, what do they mean by high end? Right? Do they mean, 1080, 1070 Ti level performance, 2070 level performance, 2080 Ti performance? What do they mean by high end?
So I'm going to guess 2080.
I'm going to guess that as well. I think that's where the high end starts. And I think the 2070 is like the max of mid-range.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. That's, of course, how we feel. They can define it however the heck they want. Pricing, if they want, it could be called the high end, right? The high end of pricing, 2070 could be included in that. So, anyway, though, this likely means that AMD and Lisa think Navi is going to be a big deal. And let's be honest, when Lisa and AMD as a whole said that Zen was going to be, they were right. So, I feel like there is some credibility that can be pulled from that. Of course, there's... how good it's going to be is complicated. And what competitive means is also another term that has to be defined, since competitive could mean competitive price-wise, price to performance-wise, right? Now, the direct quote here is from Lisa Su is, "We will be competitive in high-end graphics. We're making high-performing quality products and building a solid long-term foundation." And there was some other talk that made it very obvious this was about gaming specifically. Now, Navi's supposed to be on 7 nanometer, which, if Navi comes out next year, very likely puts them ahead of anything that Nvidia is going to be releasing in terms of process technology, because Nvidia is still on 12 nanometer, which is really basically just modified 14 nanometer. So 7 nanometer could be what puts AMD ahead of Nvidia, because if their architecture design is good enough and it's been silicon problems that haven't been then that right there is what can give them a big advantage. Now, of course, that begs to question what happens when Nvidia goes to 7 nanometer, right? But Vega was a good architecture, and it was just hot and power hungry. But it kind of proved their engineers know what they're doing, and 7 nanometer could help with the two big problems of hot and power hungry.
Yeah.
So that right there could be a pretty big deal. I think this is a viable thing considering what AMD's been doing. I hope it's true because I think we need competition on the high end and the mid-range and the low end. We need competition along the whole product stack, and there hasn't been competition on the high end for a long time. There's been competition on the upper mid-range and below, and especially really good competition, I'd say, in the direct mid-range, which is the best area to have that, but it's also the easiest area to have that. So that was cool. And speaking of AMD GPUs specifically, there's a German editor that confirmed that there is an RX 590 running on 12 nanometer Polaris 30 GPU. So this isn't big news. It's something we kind of knew, but his name's Andreas Schilling. I don't know if that's how you pronounce the name. Might be.
Yeah, I think so.
I would assume. He posted photos of the actual box for the 590, so that this is a confirmation. This isn't just like a claim or a rumor. And he posted photos that confirmed the 590 and also confirmed the 12 nanometer because it says FinFET 12 on it. And he also doesn't believe he's under an embargo of any sort. He's not, so that's why he was willing to release this. $300 price tag. And it could be a good competitor to NVIDIA's mid-range stuff, such as a 1070. We'll see. I would love to see that. Let's say...
maybe it'll compete with the fifth version of the 1060.
Maybe. Okay, so there is... so we already have the RX 580 and stuff, right? And then we have Vega. Vega 56 is very competitive against 1070 and quite competitive against 1070 Ti. And so I would hope that if this is in that realm, that this is maybe actually beating Vega. But Polaris was arguably a better architecture from a design standpoint. So it would make sense that they could maybe use that to surpass things, right? So that's understandable.
I feel like Vega leaned into the compute a lot more.
A lot more than was necessary. Like almost like they shouldn't have done gaming with it, right?
Yeah.
But more like I think it's great also for professional type things in terms of Apple using it in their MacBook Pro and stuff like that. I think is great. A great use for Vega, especially because when Vega is underclocked, it's actually quite competitive in terms of power efficiency and performance. But for high performance gaming, it just wasn't something that exciting.
Yeah.
And that's fine. That happens. Speaking of a bunch of 1060s.
Yeah.
So we talked about this last week some, but
We've got some new confirmations pretty much.
Yeah.
It was...
This is a disappointment from them.
So we pretty much got confirmation that the whole 580 with the same amount of cores that puts it on par with the 570.
Literally a 570 with a 580 brand on it.
Yeah.
And a 40 megahertz overclock. Can't forget that. That potentially one extra frame you'll get out of it.
So, yeah, that's pretty much confirmed. We had an actual board partner from China confirm that they have that product coming out soon.
Unfortunate.
It sounds like it's a
It was XFX, right?
Yeah. It sounds like it's going to be a primarily Chinese product, which for some reason has led people to defend this by saying, well, it's in China.
Well, I think the idea behind that... I want to know, I actually should look into this more. I don't know what the 570 is like in China. Maybe the 570, maybe this is a bigger gap than we thought. Maybe it's still the same amount of cores, but a huge gap in terms of RAM and clock speed and other things like that. So I'd have to know more about the details of the 570 in China. But still, I don't really like this. And if this comes to America, that's really bad. I don't like that Reddit comment you showed me, is it was a genuine mistake because AMD is just so used to rebranding stuff, they just forgot that it was the same chip.
Yeah.
Because I don't like AMD doing this, and I don't know what I hate more, rebranding crap as better than it is, or coming out with something great and then coming out with something with the same name that's crap, which Nvidia does, right? Where it's like, oh, well, this one has slower RAM, and this one has different RAM, and this one has less cores.
The slower RAM is absolutely BS. When it comes to less RAM, at least
I feel
like that is more easily visible to a consumer.
It is. Less cores, which also has been done by Nvidia,
Yes.
is a crappy thing. And also, if it's a significant clock speed difference, that's also crappy.
Like,
so
with,
it's like
with how well AMD has been doing and with how well liked AMD has been,
Why
they
would
should
they
be
do
doing
this?
things to ensure that the public image as far as them as a company is great, because that's only going to do good for them.
It is. And
Trying to mislead like this is just going to piss people off.
It is. I really hope that there is a good reason for this. I don't think there is, but I really hope that they have a reason for it.
I could see there being a really good reason for this is if somehow it was performance-wise on par with a 580, just somehow with less cores. But since it's only a 40 megahertz overclock, that's not going to happen.
That's not going to happen. So what I will say, okay, the other acceptable thing would be if the 570 in China is more different than I think it is.
Then they should be calling it something different.
I think so, yeah.
75,
something
70,
like
whatever,
that, yeah.
but-
And so, like, I think Lisa needs to pay closer attention to this kind of stuff, because this is the kind of stuff that makes people mad. I mean, rebranding a 480 as a 580 is one thing, especially because you double the VRAM and you add substantially higher clock speeds and you refine the process so that it's easier to overclock, uses less power, all that stuff. That's a refresh is different than a complete rebrand, right? And AMD's done a lot of refreshes.
They've also done a lot of rebrands.
I'd say they've done a decent amount of rebrands. I wouldn't say a lot. There's been a lot of the lineups have been refreshes where they do make significant improvements. I still don't like it. Don't get me wrong, but this kind of stuff is taking it too far. Just like the GT 1030 with DDR4. Yeah. It's taking it too far, and I don't like them doing this. And I just almost wonder, is this just a joke between Lisa and Ginseng since they're related? And they're just like, let's see who can like troll the market the best. Yeah. And so like Ginseng's like, we're going to slap DDR4 on this 1030. It's going to be like half the performance. Everybody's going to yell. And then Lisa's like, we're going to brand this one the next level up.
Yeah. I think that what they should do is they should just have a big family get together, and then these two should just sit down and be like, you should do this, and you should do this, and it's both really dumb things, and they should both do it.
I think it would be great.
Let each other pick stupid
Or they could
things
do it
for
at the same time to be
do.
a joke. Do it at the same time, like the same move, but their product stack at the same time.
AMD should release a 1080, and Nvidia should release a 580.
So it would be an RX 1080 and a GTX 580. That would be hilarious. Or another thing that they could do that would be an obvious troll if it was at the same time was like AMD releases another 580 and Nvidia releases another 1080, both with half the cores of the actual one, but with the exact same name. And they do it at the same time. Yeah. Can you imagine how mad Steve from Gamers Nexus would be? He's already mad enough about this. That kind of stuff, want to hit something.
Yeah. Or rather than a monolithic die of a bunch of small cores, what if they just had a really big core?
I don't know if that's how that works, Daniel.
A lot of transistors in one big core. You get amazing single-threaded performance.
Yeah, but GPUs don't work that way. You'd have to do it with CPUs. No. So, on a good note, again from AMD, is they have partnered with Cray Inc. to make a supercomputer. It's very Cray, using their EPYC platform. So that's pretty impressive. Cray is huge in the supercomputer market. They've done a lot of amazing stuff. They've worked with huge companies out there. And this supercomputer called Shasta is going to be using stuff from lots of vendors, including Intel and stuff too.
Yeah, Intel, ARM, Nvidia, AMD,
EPYC
both in processors
and
graphics.
I think EPYC is the biggest portion of the cost and the money and all that.
And also, though, Shasta is going to be a product line.
Right.
Whereas the specific computer in question is being sold for the Department of Energy.
Which is awesome.
Which is using EPYC.
Which is using EPYC and should be using EPYC because they are actually more power efficient. So
it's pretty epic.
It's pretty epic. So it's a $146 million supercomputer for the Department of Energy. Very impressive. It's one of the largest in terms of monetary value in Cray's history. They've had one or two, I think, bigger than it in terms of money. So that's a lot of money being thrown at a supercomputer. Of course, this isn't on the scale some of the stuff that like China's done with the Milky Way and whatnot. I think that's the proper nickname for it. But still, very exciting. I'm happy to see this. I'm happy to see Epic being in more systems and being more popular. It's great.
Yeah.
It's super great. Mobile stuff, going back to some of that realm.
We haven't even talked about phones yet.
That's true. We haven't talked about phones, but I mean more in that normie area. Although I guess you couldn't call this first one normie.
Yeah, so the red hydrogen reviews are in, and
it's amazing.
It's essentially an upgraded version of HTC's 3D phone from a few years ago. Womp womp. So
but by upgraded, we still mean almost 2 generations behind.
Yeah. So we've got Snapdragon 835, which is going to be 2 gens old here in a few months, most likely. The 3D, which we were kind of hoping was going to be like really good,
like
because
revolutionary, even
ends up being about on par with the 3DS.
So they use the word holographic, but really it's just a parallax screen.
It's depth, not.
So it's a parallax barrier. That's all that is. Then it's just a parallax barrier on a screen. I'm sure they're doing something that's actually unique, but it doesn't seem like it's giving this a result that's worth it. Unique? Let's see. A good parallax barrier?
No, a good parallax barrier is the new 3DS.
Okay, I will say that's a good one.
The new 3DS is the best 3D, I think, still, from something that does not require glasses.
Yeah, I think so. Actually, it's the only 3D that doesn't require glasses that doesn't make me sick. In fact, it's the only 3D, aside from VR, that doesn't make me sick.
The red hydrogen is more on par with the regular 3DS than the new 3DS. Because the regular 3DS does not do the facial tracking.
Does this not?
I think it does, but it doesn't do it very well. Like, you can still see when you're moving it, the gaps.
Whereas with the 3DS, unless it was quick or pretty drastic, you didn't really notice at all that it was moving. With the new one, I should say. Yeah, with the new 3DS.
Because the new 3DS
the old 3DS, you should turn 3D off. And I think that was actually really clever of Nintendo. Just really quick to state that the 2DS was so different and crappy that you had to buy the 3DS if you wanted the good form factor, even though the 3D sucked. And then they come out with the new of both of those. The new 2DS is awesome, but you actually have good 3D now.
Yeah.
So, anyway, though.
So when it comes to the 3D... A big part of the problem also might just be the content that's available for it, because what reviewers were saying was that when you recorded 3D video, it was actually pretty good. It's just you can't share it with anyone because nobody else has these phones because they're expensive. The depth effect, while it's noticeable, is not super, super deep.
Yeah.
And then also a really big concern was that the tech needed for this effect leaves a noticeable impact on 2D quality of content. Sucky. Because there's visible dots.
So in terms of even if the 3D's off?
Yes.
That's actually
that's actually
not a good parallax barrier then.
I don't think it's a parallax barrier. I think they're doing something unique, and I don't think that they did it as well as it needs to be.
If they are doing something unique, you're stupid, because parallax barrier has proven very well that it's good, aside from the cutting horizontal resolution in half.
I think that they were going for trying to get something better, and I think that it's ultimately... There's a reason they delayed it so long. It's because I think my guess would be they couldn't get that working well, and they were losing so much money and taking so much flack, they just released it.
Yeah, that could be. And they're not going to sell many, but oh well. I mean, because... parallax barrier is half your horizontal resolution, right? That's just they half you.
I think this still does that.
And so if this still does that, at that point it really does, because like with the 3DS, right? The turning 3D off actually does give you better graphics, because especially if you're not using the 3D, like on the old one where you might be off of it sometimes, is because you do get double the horizontal resolution effectively, and. So this is just a big disappointment. We thought it was going to be something revolutionary.
Yeah, other than that, the battery life is amazing because it has a massive battery.
So that's a good incentive for some people, but it's still an 835.
The speakers are not great, but not terrible. There's like distortion at the high end, but they sound pretty good. Not maxed out. Okay. Nothing special.
So it's like a lot of Samsung speakers at this point.
It's like most phone speakers, I would say.
Yeah.
The camera, which a lot of people were hoping would use a red sensor and red color science. No, it's just a Sony sensor.
Now, don't get me wrong, it's a good sensor, and it's going to be a good camera.
But it also doesn't do computational
But it doesn't do
photography,
anything special.
so it's not as good as the iPhone or the Pixel.
Now, it's just like... Well, not as good for normies, I would say. There might be some stuff that's better for a professional?
No, because you can use camera apps that don't use that functionality.
To get rid of...
iPhone and
so
Pixel.
I don't know what the...
You just lose the computational photography.
So you lose a
without
feature.
gaming.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. Way too expensive. Absolutely agree with that, too.
Yeah.
Oh, my.
So, with the camera, real quick, before we go on. You can do 3D recording if you want that for some reason. So
it's just a single sensor, right?
No, it's 2.
Oh, okay.
Which also means I think it has it might have a telephoto. I'm not sure.
It'd have to be an adjustable one, though, so they could not do telephoto for the 3D, I don't know. It's like 2 literally just for the 3D. It's like, that's why the phone's so expensive. Excuse me?
No, because Samsung has a phone with 5 cameras.
LG, you mean?
LG. Samsung has 4. Sorry. 3 on the back, 1 on the front. LG has 3 on the back, 2 on the front.
Yes, right. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
And then the other big thing pertaining to the camera and everything else.
But they're all different. That's what I was going to say. They're all different. If this is 2 of the same thing, then it's a waste.
Is that one of the big things with this is modularity, being able to add on parts.
There's a lot of pogo pins on the back. That you
and so there's the idea of being able to add red sensors, and originally we were thinking this was going to be used as like the compute part of it for processing that imagery.
Yeah, and you would just be essentially attaching a sensor and lens.
If this is not good enough to process the red color science, it is not good enough to use a red sensor, because the red sensor would use the red color science.
It would.
So that means that ultimately what this is going to be is a fancy display for a body you attach to it.
Yeah.
Instead of being the brains to a phone that you can attach good sensors to, like what was originally kind of hinted at, it's ultimately coming down to you're just buying a red camera, and instead of buying another display, you're like gonna just magnetically attach this, I feel like.
Yeah, now...
We'll have to wait and see,
but
because
you could still do recording without red color science using an attached red sensor. Like, I'm saying they could do that if they wanted.
Like, one of the things they talked about was an 8K sensor. Do you honestly think this is going to be able to really handle that very well?
That's a good point. Yeah, I think that,
like, if it can,
because I would like the idea, even with this phone's caveats. I would like the idea of, if you are a big photographer, you need a phone and you need a camera. So you buy this phone and then you go spend $5,000 on red equipment for the lenses and stuff, and then you've spent a total of $6,000, or even if it was like $11,000, a lot less than you've spent on a full red set, right? So, and then you still get the phone out of it, so you're getting this double usage. And so I think it would be good for that if this other crap wasn't getting in the way.
What I would really like to see from a Gen 2 of this phone, assuming it gets a Gen 2, is they would I feel like they're not big enough yet to do this on their own, but work with somebody to design a chip dedicated to processing the red color science.
Yeah.
And then do a proper, like, custom red mobile sensor. And then even if all else sucks, you've got a nice red camera that's usable for not just, like, you can add other attachments to it, but, like, if for someone like a vlogger could get that type of quality with the thing they carry in their pocket.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And realistically, if they could use this direction in a next-gen product to help get red equipment and near the red quality stuff for a much lower price and a much more justifiable... That's kind of what I was getting at with the phone, is a justifiable amount of money to spend because you get another product out of it. That right there can help a lot of creators. Because honestly, if this channel were just a little bigger and it was going to be, like $5,000 phone and everything else that you need for filming, I would probably invest in that.
Yeah.
Just because the quality you get over, say, a $1,500 or $2,000 camera, it's like so much better, and then you're also getting a phone for that.
Yeah.
So
I think that, assuming that they do well enough with this that they can justify continuing with this product line, and I really hope that they stick with it. I think that this sets a good ground. It's just not a good product in and of itself.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
It's a really good starting block, and
so
I hope
Red, please don't give up.
I hope you guys pull an Apple and continue and work through it.
I hope so. I hope you also get rid of this 3D garbage. If you don't think you can make it amazing, get rid of it. Especially because on an Android platform and stuff, it starts to come to, what's the point? HTC did that, and their 3D was actually, it was pretty good. It was actually, I would say their 3D was very close to comparable to the new 3DSs. It was a higher res display. Well, it had good face tracking. It had great face tracking. I used quite a few of HTC's, quite a few different ones of their 3D phones, and they all tracked consistently.
Yeah.
I liked them. I thought it looked pretty good is what I'm getting at. But the operating system never made sense for it. So anybody that bought it just played with it for a gimmick for a week like a lot of Samsung features and then turned it off.
So in other cell phone news, we've got
some
the OnePlus,
better news.
The OnePlus 6T news got confirmed. So we've got it's essentially a OnePlus 6 but with some updates. So same Snapdragon 845. You have the choice of 6 or 8 gigs of RAM and 128 or 256 gigs of storage.
No 64 option anymore, which is cool.
Yes, so they got rid of 64 gig option.
Still no SD card slot though, right?
Correct.
So then I guess that's a good move. Thank you, OnePlus, for doing that.
So you've got the option of, with the 128 gig, either 6 or 8 gigs of RAM. It's only $30 more to get 8 gigs of RAM.
So you should probably do it. Yeah. They just really wanted to hit that price point.
So it's $549 for the 6 gigs, 128 gig storage. It's $579 for the 8 gigs with 128 gig storage, and then it's $649 for the 8 gigs with 256 of storage.
It's cool.
Yeah.
I think it's well priced, especially in a market where Samsung and Apple phones are costing $1,000 plus. Like, this is a good direction.
Yeah. So you've got 3 cameras. On the back, you've got a 16 megapixel Sony camera, and then a 20 megapixel also Sony camera for the longer distance. They called it a portrait camera, but essentially that's they mean for like zoom. I don't know why.
That's kind of weird.
And then a 16 megapixel Sony front camera. So they managed to. I've seen sometimes where, with like Samsung phones especially, they've had issues where they couldn't get enough Sony sensors. So they had to use some Sony, some Samsung, so they didn't specify. OnePlus was very specific and very proud that they got all Sony sensors.
So, selfie sensors too. This is a good selfie camera.
Yeah.
Which some people really care about. And I think a lot of phones are still lacking. Yes. So, good on them.
Also, I would say what will be the first mainstream-ish phone with a fingerprint
I'd call
sensor.
this full mainstream. I would. It's not through carriers, but a lot of people buy it.
It's through T-Mobile.
Oh yeah,
that's something.
I forgot.
It's not just through T-Mobile. This phone, which had its launch today, did so well at some T-Mobile stores. The main flagship T-Mobile store had quite a lot more customers show up for this than the iPhone.
Wow.
This is a big deal.
I wish, for me exclusively, that the display was not AMOLED, because I would buy this for my secondary phone. This is really awesome. Under display, though.
Under display fingerprint sensor, 3,700 milliamp hour battery.
I want to touch back, though, on that fingerprint sensor.
Okay.
That is super awesome.
Yes.
That is super cool.
Actually, we should mention something. So we mentioned before about the front-facing camera and it getting bright as a joke to do that.
Yeah, to turn... This
does kind of present a problem for people that are using it, especially if you're grabbing your phone in bed.
I wouldn't even call it a problem. I call it an annoyance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on the person.
I don't think it's a reason to not buy the phone.
Yes, though. It's just something that will irritate you when you're using it.
Yes.
Is that because... So if you can use multiple methods of locking the phones. You can use the front-facing camera for the RGB sensor for the face unlock, and then you can use the fingerprint sensor. Well, at night, you can't really use the camera, which means you have to use the fingerprint sensor. Well, the way that under-display fingerprint sensors work is that they shine a bright light on your finger to reflect back your fingerprint to the sensor. And the issue is that your finger is not always going to cover all of the light.
Nope.
And so if you're using your phone at night, especially, I think this creates a bigger problem if you wake up in the middle of the night and you're you check on your phone to see what, to check a text message or something.
Yeah.
Because it shines a bright light, and so some of that's going to get through, and you're going to get
Something to note, though. The biggest complaint that MKBHD had, because he did a review on this, it wasn't the light used to light up your finger. It was the animation was also full brightness around it.
Yes.
And that is something that OnePlus should fix.
Yes.
Because if it was just the bit under your
He's
finger,
also got
it would not
bigger
be...
hands than most people, so
So other people it might... Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
That's part of what I was trying to get
Well, of course, though,
because
so it turns the display to full brightness, right?
it turns that location because it's AMOLED.
Yes, that's what I mean. Yeah, it turns that location.
You also can't do fingerprint sensor under the display on LCD.
Yes. I wonder if they could... if they adjust that lit up area depending on how big the part touching it is, because they could very easily do that with the capacitive sensors. And so in that case, then it's just a matter of turning off the max brightness animations around your finger.
That would be cool.
That would be awesome, and maybe it's something they already could do. It's just that animation that's the problem, and then they could very easily just fix this.
Yeah.
Because then it would be still bright. You'd see it through your thumb and around it a little bit, but it wouldn't be like in your face, ouch, right? And of course, you can always just close your eyes until you know it's unlocked. But, just touch the spot. Yeah, you shouldn't have to. It's an inconvenience, but it's a way around that.
RIP headphone jack. Lol.
Except that, I don't want to just leave it at lol. It's, that is Oppo's fault. More so than OnePlus's fault, right? Because isn't this just an Oppo chassis, right?
Yes, but it's not like OnePlus was required to use the Oppo chassis.
They have to use somebody's, though. They don't make their own chassis because it's too expensive. That's part of why the phone's cheap, from my understanding.
But also...
Like, what are they going to use? Like,
since
a Samsung
we're going to touch
chassis?
on that, though, since people like to say, oh, see, look, OnePlus does it so cheap, everyone should be able to. They don't do their own design on the physical design of the phone.
And that right
so
there
that's
is
a huge cost.
Yeah.
But no, so ultimately...
They include a dongle, though. Let's first say that.
Yes.
Unlike the new iPhone, they include a dongle.
OnePlus chose which Oppo frame they were using.
Okay, yes, that's true.
They chose to go with this one, whereas they currently have one with a headphone jack.
That's true.
So
this still cringes me and hurts me every time, and I'm still going to refuse until I absolutely can't to buy any phone without a headphone jack. So
have fun with that.
I mean, it's just it's lame. It's lame.
Yeah.
And I mean, you have to understand too. I'm coming from a guy that has $500 earbuds.
Oh, I understand.
That's that right there is an effect on its own.
Just buy the Razer dongle.
Well, yeah, but also my opinion on this is would be the same. Aside from that, the reason I won't buy a phone is a lot of it's that, but you know what I mean. Yeah. So, tiny news. Okay, so anyway, this is just our we're gonna call this segment "Tiny News" from here on out. So, Oculus co-founder is leaving Facebook. What's his name again? I always forget it.
I don't know.
Oh, I'm gonna look it up.
It's not the main guy that everyone knows from Oculus because he already left.
Oh, did he already leave? I didn't.
A long time ago. Way long time ago.
Lucky Palmer, right?
Yeah,
or whatever
way long
it was.
time ago.
I didn't know he... Oh, okay. For some reason, I thought that... I didn't
time.
read the article,
No,
so
co-founder,
I thought... The co-founder, not the founder. Okay. So...
Yeah, so essentially, there's been a long string recently of major people leaving Facebook that got acquired by Facebook via company purchases. And this is just another one of those. It sounds like the reason why is that the Rift 2 might have been canceled.
Oh.
But that seems really weird to me because they
Or it's just maybe not as good as they wanted it to be. Like, target audience.
But then why would you... Yeah,
I don't know. It's weird.
They just had an event where they just confirmed that they want to have 3 headsets going forward.
They do. High-end.
The Go, the Quest, and the Rift.
Yeah.
By getting rid of the Rift 2, that means that you literally couldn't even last a month from that event before you changed your plans.
Yeah. But it's Facebook, so...
I know.
So anyway, kind of weird, kind of surprising. But next topic is...
Speaking of Oculus...
Yeah, Red Dead Redemption 2 on Oculus?
Maybe. That
was a good maybe.
Yeah. The mobile app for Red Dead Redemption 2 has hinted at a couple things. PC version and specifically Oculus support.
So yay to both of those, and thank you Rockstar for, again, being one of the few developers that takes their time to do it right on other platforms. Good on you. I hope it happens for both of those. Yeah. And especially because by the time that happens, I might actually have an Oculus. So, very cool.
And
very
also,
cool.
though, I wouldn't be surprised if we end up just seeing this game come out on Steam and support Steam VR headsets.
Yeah.
And you don't... the app wouldn't need code to mention that specifically, whereas if you're releasing a product on Oculus, while Steam apps can use the Oculus API, it's generally just a good idea to also be in the Oculus store.
Yeah.
And so I think that what we're probably seeing is specific mentions of Oculus code because it's going to be in the Oculus store, and then general PC code, which I think also would give us a Vive version. I would be very surprised if this was Oculus exclusive unless Oculus paid money, and how much money are they going to pay Rockstar
to do this?
To shut out every other VR headset.
And also, would Rockstar go for it? I don't think so. Yeah. They're a pretty good dev. Okay, so Red Dead Redemption 2's HDR kind of sucks. And by sucks means it's not HDR. So the game's labeled as HDR support and stuff, but when you turn it on, it basically doesn't look any different. It's upscaled SDR. Basically, it's SDR to look good on HDR TVs. It's not proper HDR by any means. It doesn't have the extra color depth and stuff like that. It's not going to cause any problems or anything like that. It isn't like a huge knock to them. Chances are they're going to update it later to have good HDR, and it was just something that they couldn't get done in time for the release and isn't important enough to delay the release.
Yeah. And then, keep in mind, this game has been worked on for 7 years-ish.
Yeah.
HDR has only really become prevalent in the last year or two.
Right.
They probably had all of their engine work done well before HDR became like a significant thing in gaming.
And it wouldn't surprise me also if maybe they did have HDR working pretty well for consoles, but they're still working on the PC form of HDR and want to do an HDR update across the board once the PC version's out. Maybe.
I feel like the PC version's going to be a long time, though.
It could be. But who knows? Maybe they've planned better because they've had so much time for this. GTA was a little different. That's why it was a 2-year delay.
Unless we're getting new consoles in a year and a half.
There's that too.
Because it would make a lot of sense then for them to do
then it lines up with what they did with GTA too, yeah.
Ultimately, like, I wouldn't be surprised if what we just see from Rockstar going forward is like they just release games a year before the end of the console generation.
That way they can re-release and make... It's a good money move, and I'm actually okay with it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, let's hope they maybe get HDR right on PC, but also that's Microsoft's fault. So there is now on the Silicon Lottery website that does custom binned chips of Intel chips and AMD chips where you can buy ones guaranteed to hit a certain clock speed at certain voltages and stuff. There's a i7 9700K, so that's the 8-core 8-thread at 5.1 gigahertz binned all cores that you can purchase. $570. Very good performance.
That is expensive.
Also not worth it, yeah. Super expensive. It's understandable. I don't criticize Silicon Lottery's pricing. It's Intel that really what it comes down to a lot of this.
I mean,
because they have to charge a premium for it, and they're already overpriced from Intel.
Yeah, but
and there's a lot of work that goes into getting these chips.
I don't disagree with that, but like, I mean, the 9700K is like a $400 chip.
I mean, $450 is probably what it's going to sell for pretty consistently. But still, it's a lot of money for getting... You could go up to double the threads at stock clocks and do the overclocking manually and get close to it. So it's still overpriced maybe, but people will pay for this kind of stuff because it is a guarantee. Silicon Lottery, from everything I've read about them and reviews I've seen, they're very good about, like, we're not going to sell you a chip that maybe can hit 5.1, or most of the time it's like this is rock solid stability, like proper Prime 95 and video rendering stable, you're good to go. All the different instruction sets good to go at this, so they do a lot of testing and a lot of work, so there was probably a lot of man hours into it, and they don't sell very many, so they have to make up those man hours somehow, right? That's what it is with products. Also, is if you sell less, you've got to price it higher, right?
But also they're selling chips for $40 more, like the straight up just base clock 9700K.
Yeah, they are. You're right.
For $40 more than Amazon.
No, that Amazon one is not.
You're right. Yeah. Okay,
so.
Never mind. I'm wrong.
Cool. So yeah, there's that. That's cool. And then this last one here, Audio Technica something or something.
Yeah. So the M50X headphones that a lot of people like is coming in a Bluetooth flavor now.
Yay! Good battery life.
40 hours.
USB-C.
Yeah. Can we stop
with the micro B crap, please? Yeah, like that'd be really great.
And they claim that they understand USB-C is important to consumers going forward. But that it would have somehow made a significant enough price difference that it wasn't viable.
Now maybe they're not lying, but that sounds like BS.
$10 more.
Yeah, I agree too. But hey, it's a thing. and that's cool because the M50Xs are a great pair of headphones.
Yeah.
They really are. I've actually considered.
But it also
getting a
puts
pair.
them in a really weird situation where what company is releasing $200 Bluetooth headphones that don't have noise cancellation? Not many.
Klipsch, Audio-Technica, I think AKG.
I would say that the
audiophile brands.
Yes,
are.
but I would say that the M50X is
more
of
than those.
more of a mainstream product than those.
I would
are.
agree with that. Yeah,
And
yeah.
I feel like it's got the reputation
Of a
among
more-
more of the mainstream that it's
Sennheiser does release mainstream type stuff though without noise canceling, although
Yeah.
they're usually not quite in this price range.
Yeah.
They're usually less.
I feel like this is competing more with the mainstream products.
Yeah. I think so.
And so it puts them in a really weird situation.
Of course, they're still going to sound better than Beats, which also don't have active noise canceling. So
But I don't count Beats as competitors.
yeah, that's true.
Don't think
Nobody
people
should
buy
count Beats.
the over-ear ones.
Yeah, yeah.
In fact,
I mean, most of the in-ears you shouldn't.
I would say that the Beats X would be fine, except for the lack of water resistance.
Yeah.
It's absurd in a workout-focused headphone to
Didn't
not.
you break yours?
Yeah, it's absurd to have workout-focused headphones that can't survive sweat.
Yeah, yeah. Agreed with that. Because they're not even like, it's not like rain sweat. Like, we're not necessarily expecting pool resistance,
Yeah.
but yeah.
So
kinda weird.
that's how we end it.
So yeah, that's it though, guys.
Start with good Apple stuff and trashing on Beats. I'm okay with that.
I think that's a great thing, especially because Apple owns Beats. So thank you everybody for watching. This is WordCast number 68. I think I said that right at the beginning too. Anyway, thank you everybody, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out all our links in the description. We got links to all the sources for everything that we have here. We got links down there to our Patreon page if you're interested in a monthly contribution, our social media connections, our website, all that other fun stuff. So a lot
And
of...
I'm going to leave you with one question. How can an Apple own Beats?